Welcome, welcome. We are
Hey,
here, TransParents. This is our fourth episode, and we took a 2 week break because of Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, and now we're back. My name is Amber. My pronouns are she, her, and this is my co host.
hi, I'm Jenny. My pronouns are also she, her. And Happy New Year, Amber.
All right, we're finally. That's why I did the little sparklies. We didn't have one, so I figured this one would be all sparkly
I
um,
love it. Hey,
to continue celebrating it.
I had a commitment that kind of got screwy, and so I guess I'm in my car. I will assure you that I am on a long stretch of pretty empty highway, so I'm not too worried. Don't be scared for me. I'm fine.
If you cut out, then you cut out, and that's when I'll cut to some of the reading pieces that I had anyway, if that happens, right?
There, there you go.
So yeah, so we figured tonight we'd go into on our very first episode. We had some questions that were kind of put out in the audience because we had a very large audience the very first episode, and the person kind of asked what was the importance of the trans label, and they questioned it as far as if this particular community wants to be accepted and included, why did they use the label instead of just saying that they were female or male instead of saying they were trans female or trans male or saying they were transgender instead of just saying that they were people. And we figured the better way instead of like going to, I did appreciate there were some people in our audience that went through and tried to answer that question in the comments, but we figured we'd just make an episode of it to kind of just talk about that, to talk about the history of it, to talk about the importance of it, to talk about the different reasons why some individuals use it and why some don't. Um, and yeah, so I figured that would be our kickoff. This for the year would be to discuss the actual trans label and what it means. Um, and let me see, go to our comments to make sure because I do not have them on to make okay, nobody's actually putting anything there yet. So if you're in the audience and you're watching this and you have questions, you have comments, or you're just here, then you can throw something up there and let us know. And I will try and pop it off and answer it while we're in it. I know
Yeah,
Jenny
let
can't
us know.
necessarily read those things.
Yes. Say hello.
Okay.
Give us a little Happy New Year.
Right, right. Um, and I'll be honest, I didn't get the invites out till really late. So I figured if anything, people can go back and watch this as a replay because this is replayable. Yay! The
Woohoo!
best thing, honestly, about this particular this show is that we can replay it. And so for that, I figured I'd read a little blip that I had made up or wrote up on this. It just kind of talks about and that way we can break down each kind of little topic. So the transgender label is necessary because it helps individuals articulate and express their gender identity accurately. Gender identity refers to a deeply felt sense of being male, female, or another gender, which may not necessarily align with their sex that was assigned at birth. For example, my son, he was assigned female at birth and is now trans male. Transgender individuals are those whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. Here are some reasons why the transgender label is considered necessary. So the first one we're going to talk about is recognition and acknowledgement. The trans label provides recognition and acknowledgement of the diverse ways people experience and express their gender identity. It allows individuals to communicate their gender experience more effectively. Because if you're not able to fully express yourself, you don't feel fully accepted. And I think that's probably the very, very first reason why people start to question that is a lot of people, I think it's hard if you're very assured and you're very comfortable and you know exactly who you are, I think it's very hard to understand other people who have the opposite experience.
I think there's, without saying that, then you just end up with, maybe a young person who suddenly begins to dress different, look different, use a different name, suddenly use different pronouns. It also is a way to explain, otherwise people don't know what that is. And to give it a name is to go, oh, okay, that's a thing that exists, and those are people that exist, and that's a different experience. And, now we know what that is rather than just, I can't imagine it not having a name.
Right, right. And actually, well, we do. We have three. Cooper actually put up here, he can't believe he's the first one. Shem is in. Good evening. And then Jeffrey joins us. Great to be here. Great to have you three, Cooper, Shem, and Jeffrey. So yeah, I think we do. We have to acknowledge when we see that there's a particular group that's not necessarily getting the needs met. It's important to kind of call attention to that particular group. That's usually how we get something done.
Right.
That's usually how we create change for that particular set. So that is probably, I would say, one of the first reasons. The second one that I listed up here was visibility and representation. The trans label contributes to visibility and representation in society. By using this term, people are able to see and understand that gender identity exists on a spectrum beyond the binary of male and female. And I do think that's probably the next part is as we shift our thought process on this, as we try and shift the community's process, society's, if you will, thought process on this, people who are very stringent male and female, it does bring, the more they hear trans, the more they hear non-binary, the more they hear any of these terms, it at least opens the door. I think a lot of people want to initially react to it, but I think at the same time, I hope that that makes them question, well, wait a minute, what are all these terms? Why are we hearing so many more? Past the rhetoric of politicians, of why it's being done.
I think too, we have to ask ourselves, like, why would it make me uncomfortable for someone to use a term or a label for themselves?
Right.
Maybe, the pushback on that would be, well, I don't want anyone to be any different, or I just want everyone to go on. It's almost a way to just kind of keep people closeted. Well, just fine, just say what you are, and then keep it moving. Like, why are we uncomfortable with that? Why are we uncomfortable with the idea that somebody would just be trying to tell us who they are and what they're experiencing?
Well, I think it always just comes back to their uncomfortability. I mean, that tends to be the people that push back, right? The people that push back are the ones that are uncomfortable.
Right.
Who have a problem with it. And that's the reason why we get the reactions from those people the same way. And Jeffrey added, I totally would have been first, but I was struggling to tag Jenny as I couldn't locate her last name. So, yeah. So he would have been first. So I guess he and Cooper are like trying to fight for first over here a little bit.
It's kind of like the whole idea of like, well, nobody should have to say anything. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of giving that I don't see color energy. Like, yes, you do. You know that people are different, and someone expressing that they're different and that difference impacts their lives. If it makes you uncomfortable, ask yourself why. Sit with that for a minute.
I think that's a good lesson for all of us, right? Like when somebody says something that makes us uncomfortable, why is it making you uncomfortable? It's not really something that they said. It's something to do with you.
Right.
Yeah, that's a big one. A big one. The third one up here I have is community and support. So the label helps individuals find a sense of community and support by identifying as transgender, people can connect with others who have similar experiences and challenges, fostering a sense of belonging and understanding. We, for one, like we were on a podcast that is a group of trans individuals that go out and educate about their experiences to help other individuals and whether they're transitioning, whether they're looking resources, whatever it is, and even to help them in their particular professional fields as well. We know one of them in particular just got removed from the ballot for reasons that she's being featured on the MSNBC and other major news organizations about the fact that this was a discriminatory law that wasn't on the ballot. It wasn't on her forms to fill out when she went in. It wasn't something included in the guidelines. And out of the 3 trans candidates that had applied in Ohio, she's the only one this law was applied to. The other 2 were able to actually go back to their boards, provide the previous information, and still stay on the ballot. She's the only one that was removed. And so Vanessa Joy, just name dropping, guys, in case you want to go look that one up. But they created that group to help people and to be able to connect and to find this community where they felt safe. Because honestly, we're at day 7, and the last count I saw is we are at 126 pieces of legislation that have already been brought forward in the first week of the year of 2024.
Tell me another cause. Tell me another topic, another talking point. Tell me another one that has brought forth that much in this first week. It may be out there. I'm interested to hear what it is.
There isn't. Last year, the total was like close to 600. And last year for 2023, it was the topic that brought the most legislation in one session ever in the history of Congress.
Yeah.
And we put almost 600 out by the end of the year. And we're at over 100 the first week.
Right.
We can't do things for our government. We're currently talking about a shutdown.
Right. And
but you can bring legislation against a group of people that makes up, and I'll correct myself, I've been saying 1% of the population, 2% of the population. It makes no sense other than you are trying to other them. And because we're also in a voting year, we understood, both Jenny and I, that this was going to ramp up because this is what they're using as their bullwhip. This is what they're using as their biggest scaremonger, fearmonger tactic, is to gaslight people, is to tell you that this is something that's in the water and it's something that the teachers are doing to people, and it's parents sexualizing and grooming their kids, and kids are running and getting all this stuff done to them and having surgeries when they're children. And guys, this stuff doesn't happen.
That it's some kind of social contagion where if you suggest it, then all these kids suddenly go, oh, well, that sounds like fun. I think I'll do that. And I'm here to tell you, I've been around trans people a while. I have a trans kid. I have looked more into like, why do I know what my gender is? You know, it's caused me to look at the concept and construct of gender and my relationship to that. But I have never once asked myself, well, am I a different gender? Like, do I feel it's never, no, I know who I am. There's no social contagion to that. I think something else that I was thinking about the other day that kind of got me was this idea that it's a phase. And I'm here to tell you a lot of things are phases. And they are. And it might be. But to suggest that, like, knowing who you really are, like, you know, sometimes you go through high school and maybe you have like a goth phase or a preppy phase. Or for me, I had a super religious phase. Yeah, those were phases, but I still knew I'm a girl, I'm a woman. You know, this idea that things are phases, if it is, let's say it is, maybe it is, I don't know. Even so, can we walk through those phases with people just like we do any phase and give them our love and support and allow them to kind of figure that out, see who they are, get to know. What is the harm in letting someone figure themselves out? I think it still comes back to that, oh, well, then you're just going to throw these kids on medicine and you're going to start chopping off body parts. That's not happening. That is not happening. It's not a phase. That's not a thing. puberty blockers, hormone blockers, these are very reversible. These are not permanent things. It's not the same. I mean, my God, I can get my child on hormones at I don't even know how old for things like birth control, and nobody's bitching about that. So,
Right. I agree. Cooper put up here, let me pop it up on the screen. Same for agender. People need to have something to use for all the folks who are not male, not female, not any position in the same spectrum that is used for social norms and roles. And that's the truth of it. Like that's the reason why that's the reason why sometimes we have to put labels on that, is to signify that specific groups need certain things. We haven't gotten to the medical part yet, but Jenny and I, before the show, we were kind of discussing it. I always hear this, well, why is there this and why is there that? Okay, well, let's talk about the fact that when I was in nursing school, we had entire courses on pediatrics, on geriatrics, on NICU, neonatal, on like specific cardiology, respiratory. There were specific groups for specific supports for specific groups, because we understood that they needed more of certain things for their care. And there is no difference in mental health care. There is no difference here. Instead, we're currently up against an agenda, a political agenda, to say that there's this group of people that they shouldn't even have access to the appropriate health care they deserve and need. And that's the reason why we're saying trans health. We're saying trans advocacy. You have to say that, because this specific group is being shut out and shut off. And not because of anything to do with science whatsoever, because all of the major medical associations support this, all of them.
Yeah, I read someone the other day said, well, it's a mental illness, and instead of being supported and coddled and what it catered to, it should be treated. And I was like, oh, are you a doctor? Are you a mental health professional? Because the treatment for that is to help them get congruency between the gender that they know that they are. Like that is the treatment. And sometimes that treatment looks like medicine, and sometimes it looks like surgery, and sometimes it just looks like a change of clothes and acceptance. But that literally is the treatment.
And it varies per individual. What everybody choose, or what any specific person chooses to do, no one else has to follow that same guideline. They have to make the same choices. They're all able to figure out what is best for them, just like we are.
Yeah.
We talk about, gender affirming care, and Jenny and I have talked about that before, like doing things with your hair, lip fillers, your wrinkles, breast lifts, like any of these butt implants, like any of that kind of stuff that society is perfect at, liposuction that you're perfectly okay with. These are different types of gender affirming care.
Yeah.
And we don't say there's a problem with it. We don't fault it. We don't make ridiculous amounts of legislation saying that it should be banned and outlawed, because it's been perfectly accepted. And this, quite frankly, has been, until a group of politicians wanted to make a big fuss about it, which is honestly the truth. That doesn't mean that they were getting the proper care that they were, because I can tell you this was one specific group that I was not really taught about in school whatsoever on what their needs were. And we were taught about lots and lots of other groups and what all their needs were, again, in specific classes. And so I really feel like that's something that should be looked at. Ooh, Ethel Lord has popped in. Let me pop up here what she said. International Caregivers Association is present and interested in LGBTQ long-term care to this special community, ICAcares.com. That is awesome. She actually came up with a new guideline for how to handle dementia. and patients with dementia, and so in their caregiving. And so she's got some brilliant work that she's been putting out. So it's awesome that they've got a long-term care guide for LGBTQ as well. Okay, so another piece that I had up here was the legal and social protections. So another reason why we use the trans label is for legal and social protections, and it's still evolving for them, but it's often necessary in legal context to advocate for their rights and protections against discrimination. And well, we wouldn't have to use it if people would stop discriminating against them, but because they are, that's why we use it. Unfortunately, very unfortunately. The medical and mental health. So we were kind of going into that, but the trans label is crucial in healthcare settings where it informs medical practitioners about an individual's specific needs, including hormone therapy, gender affirming surgeries, and mental health support. And like Jenny said, there have been a lot of states that have tried and have passed legislation on the premise that there were surgeries being done on minors and calling it genital mutilation. For instance, there was a judge in Florida a couple of weeks ago who shut Ron DeSantis down because he had put in legislation stating exactly that, banning children from trans care or minors from transgender care or affirming care, and said that the reason was because of, there were children who were being mutilated. And the truth of the matter was it was hyperbole because there wasn't a single case that had happened in the state. And the judge caught him on it. And honestly, that's probably the case in almost every red state because the red states are who are trying to pass all of these laws. And when you go look at them, very, very, very few of these are you hearing about children with genital mutilation. Number one, I can tell you that as a minor myself, I had to wait until I was 18 to have a breast reduction. And I'd had a car accident at 16 that did damage in my shoulder. And they were trying to reduce nerve damage in my shoulder and thought that was the relief that I needed, right? Or that hopefully that would be less than going into the nerves in the back of my neck. So they tried this surgery first, but they had to wait till I was 18. Number one, because I was already developing, you want to wait until that child has stopped developing before you do the surgery, so you don't have to do it again. So right. I had to wait until women typically stop developing around the age of 18. So I had to wait till 18 to have that surgery. So if I, as a heterosexual woman and minor, had to wait till I was 18, till I was an adult to have that surgery, and my mother was perfectly on board with this, why do you think that they're doing that to children? They're not, because if they did, they'd have to do it again.
Can I also mention that genital mutilation is a very frequent and daily practice in this country anyway? We are snipping the foreskin off of baby boys without their consent every day, and nobody has issue with that. So what do you mean mutilation? Are you saying changing it to something else, or are you talking about taking a scalpel to someone's genitals? Because we're already doing that.
Let's see. Ethel came back and said the ICA has created the new standard in long-term care that includes all nationalities, languages, sexual preferences, etc. That is awesome. Let's see. Next month, I'm a presenter at the Montreal Alzheimer's Society focusing on long-term care and the LGBT community. My presentation is the first and only one for this society in Canada. See, that is awesome. She really looks out for both communities, which I think is spectacular because not a lot of practitioners are doing that. Cooper, isn't there also evidence that puberty blockers have a net benefit? They do. I mean, if you have the puberty blocker, if you have a child that does feel this way and the doctors are ready to put them on them, if you take a puberty blocker, that keeps that development from happening. And the reason why they do that is, again, you're trying to keep things that they feel incongruent with from kind of making the situation worse. I wish I had been able to do that for my son because my son's going to have surgery to remedy a lot of that. And had he known at that stage in his life that's what he wanted, then we could have possibly prevented that future surgery. And I think that's probably part of it, is that we are trying to prevent surgery. Why would you?
It is an opportunity to pause and
Right.
allow this child to kind of, if you want to talk about giving them time to think, this is a great way to give them time to think about it, to really explore that a little more.
Right.
Because if the fear is, well, if you block those hormones, then they will stick with that, because maybe those hormones kick in and tell you who you are. Again, there's just no evidence to suggest that. Kids know who they are. They really do. And if they need some time to think, or it's going to be a non-binary situation, and then they don't mind whatever, however their body develops, then easy peasy. Your kid can stop taking them.
Right. Cooper put up here, the transphobic treatment that, of course, does not work is conversion therapy, not gender affirming healthcare. Right. And actually, I believe I can't remember. I know there's been a couple of cases where the judge actually ruled against, honestly, even, I know there's one specific one where the parents are trying to sue the state because the judge removed their child, because I can't remember if the child is non-binary, identifies as non-binary or trans, or what their specific identification is. But the parents, their Christian belief was that they should be able to raise their child in their beliefs, which was to take the child to conversion therapy. And I think they may have already tried to do it one time, and the judge was just removed the kid. And so now they're kind of suing the state and saying that they should have the right, because that's their religious belief, they should have the right to do that. And yeah, I don't think that's going to go over well in the long term.
Like, does the child get a right to a religious belief? Can the child say that's not my religious belief, or can they say, hey, I may subscribe to that religion because, hey, side note, there are plenty of LGBTQ people who are in fact Christian, but they may not necessarily believe that is part, you know what I mean? There's people who are Christian and totally support gay marriage. There's people who are Christian and absolutely support transgender folks. Does the child even get a say in their own religious beliefs?
We'll see, that's an entire show.
Because if they don't, then you don't have true faith. What you have is indoctrination and, honestly, cult-like control.
That's kind of looking back at my childhood. That's very much how I looked at religion. It's honestly the reason why my oldest, went for a very, very brief window, but I wouldn't even say probably a year. And then that was it. My children didn't do church. I felt like they could make that decision of what they believed in and what they wanted to seek and what would be their source as they aged and as they matured. And it wouldn't be something that I forced on them. It was something that they chose. Some people I don't think agree with that, but that was how I raised my kids, and that was influenced on the way I was raised, which was, this is your religion and this is what we do. And then realize that that's where a lot of my bigotry, where most of my racism, where a lot of my prejudice, most all of it sourced back to those places. And I didn't like that. So yeah, I kind of stepped away from all of it. That's what you got to do sometimes.
People don't consider that. People don't consider that children are born agnostic. This idea that, we impart our beliefs onto our kids. And then but if my belief is the truth, and if my belief is keeping them out of some kind of eternal damnation, it's still your belief, I don't know. Anyway.
Right. No, I'm very much, because I think we all get to choose what that is for ourselves. I very much know that's been mine, like a kind of again, I had some other reasons why. My children just had a lot of things going on when they were very young, and I just kind of said, I'm taking a time out from my religion, and walked away. Kind of used the example and said, I'm going to go wander the desert maybe for 40 years, and I might return, I might not. And my mother did not like me using that example, and I was just like, well, I mean, it's better to scream at the heavens. I'm not going to do that, but I need a timeout. I'm coming over here for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
And never honestly went back. I started doing deep dives in college when I was in my early 30s to, well, a lot of my 30s in and out of college. I did a lot of deep studies into cultures and religions and world religions and so forth, and really just the history of it. And yeah, that just kind of, again, got me to look at what my own source was, what I felt like my beliefs were. To really look at what is your belief, not what you've been taught, not what was handed to you. What do you truly believe? And I had to kind of identify some of that when my father was sick and my father was dying, because he had asked those questions of where did I believe he was going, um, and the importance of the services and so forth, like whether or not I felt like with cremation, would he be able to go to heaven? Those kinds of things. Like, I mean, they were, so I really, I did that deep dive, and then kind of that's where I landed on it and kind of stayed on it. I'm spiritual. Okay, so the last piece, at least for these pieces, or this 6-piece breakdown that I did, was for personal empowerment. And that one is for many individuals, adopting a transgender label is an empowering step towards self discovery and self acceptance. It allows people to embrace their authentic selves and live more authentically. And I don't think it's necessarily for all individuals, and it's not. But I think some use it as I was this and I want to be that. So while I'm in this process, this is who I am. And then on the other side of that, again, their label may change. That is totally up to them on whether they want to use it or not. And I know people who are very proud to use the label. I know other people who are like, I don't want to be known as the label. Like, I'm more than a label. And so some people I've come into contact with lots of different age ranges and different opinions on this. And I'd say my son kind of lands on the this is kind of the process of I'm going from this to this, and this is kind of my acknowledgement that I'm in this process. It's letting you know I'm in this process. And I think kind of in a way to respect that. It's hard for them, honestly, like to go through that. My son was talking about, changing his Instagram and changing, it's official. My son did get his name changed before the end of the year. Yay! He actually got it before Christmas. We just didn't get the notification. So he started the new year as himself, with his new name, which is awesome.
Very cool.
But that's part of that process, right? And he's talking about, like, how do I, like, if I go just change to the new name, people that I may not have been in contact for a little bit, when they go to look for me, they may not be able to find me. And so again, he's talking about having to go through this kind of like changing his name slowly process, even on his information, so that people will still know how to contact him. And so, yeah, because he was kind of like, I gotta go start doing that. And like his email is in his dead name. So he's like, I gotta create a new email. So there's lots of new things that come into that. And I think that is something that can be very empowering for them. And I'll also mention that within the trans community, there are also a lot of other terms that can be used, like non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid, gender diverse is one that I use quite often, to talk or to describe their gender identity. Just wanted to add that. So what is your opinion, I guess, on the empowerment part, Jenny?
I think it just comes down to, when I got sober, a big part of my identity really was, being in this new sobriety, and I was very vocal about it, and being able to label myself an alcoholic was empowering to me. It gave me claim over this part of myself that for a long time I didn't understand. I
Right.
didn't really know what it was or understand what it meant or why was I like this. And being able to give myself a label, I loved it. It made all of these things about me make sense. It was also something that other people could understand, even though a lot of people don't understand alcoholism. But if
Right.
I can say, I'm an alcoholic, then people understand maybe why I don't drink in social settings, which you should just never ask somebody why they drink in the first place, but it shuts the conversation down. It was also important for me to be able to say that to my doctors. I, hey, I'm alcoholic. I'm not going to, there are certain medications I don't want to be on. Hey, I'm alcoholic. This might explain some of my past medical history or, other issues. It is empowering. And today I don't feel it as necessary maybe to share it, but I still have no shame or anything around it because it's just part of who I am. And because talking about it lets other people know. I mean, I never know when I'm going to be in the room with somebody who is also in recovery or who is struggling or who may thinks they don't know somebody else who understands. But it's mine. It's my label. It belongs to me. It belongs to lots of people, but it also belongs to me. And using it helps me understand myself. It helps me accept myself. Um, and I fully support that, but I also understand if somebody doesn't want to because they're not comfortable with that. It really comes down to however somebody wants to label themselves, let them. They're not
Right.
telling you have to label yourself. I think that's why so many people got irritated with, oh, well, now you're putting the label cisgender on me. And even though I think that's silly because all it means is not trans, it just means that you're anyway. But to have that fear of it, like, oh, well, that means people are going to label me. Well, then don't label you. Don't worry about it. People are doing what's right for them, and it doesn't affect you.
I think that's the part that people don't understand. It doesn't affect you. It really, it doesn't affect you. Like, if it doesn't affect you, why do you have an opinion about it? Why does it matter how my kid identifies?
Yeah.
Like, I do, but I also I have to be real careful with that because, I think about it. These parents could have a kid that identifies that way, is scared to death, or refuses to come out to them
Yeah.
because they know how they feel about it. They know how rigid their family members are on the subject. I think about, again, why we use these labels, and sometimes it's important that again, and like the thing with having their own, the empowerment, like having their own communities, specifically this community that is so targeted right now. They need to know where safe is. And so I
Yeah.
think when somebody says, hey, I'm going to have this, this is a room only, or this particular platform, this particular thread, whether it be on Discord or whether it be on LinkedIn, this group is only for trans people, so that they know that they're safe in those rooms, because there are so few spaces right now that they feel protected in what they say and do. We know
God.
specifically on LinkedIn you can't. I last year removed or reported 167 by the end of the year, 167 transphobic comments. Only one was
Good
ever
for you.
removed. But only
God
one was
dang.
ever removed. That's it. And so if that's me as the mom of a trans kid, as a trans advocate out trying to make a difference, if that's me reporting that information and being shut down, I can't imagine what the trans individual who's not getting supported when they're reporting, hey, this is transphobic, and LinkedIn comes back and says, no, it's not.
That's not.
You are giving them no safety, no trust whatsoever on your platform. Because I actually called attention to that, to an issue that I had going on last week, and I kind of called out trust and safety and said exactly that. I was like, if I think I can't keep my space safe, what do you think the people of color on your platform feel? What do you think women feel? What do you think the
Right.
LGBT community feels? Yeah, I wasn't nice. Uh, I tend to like to put the truth out there, and that's what I did. So Ethel adds, let's see, I think once people realize there's a structural difference in the brain that now could be confirmed at the time of birth or even prior to birth, it will be free everyone and the world will be a much better place. You know, Ethel, that is a brilliant point. We have talked about that on here before, but there's some studies that have come out now, and they've proven that that typically transgender people, if you looked at their brain, the specific part that actually forms for gender identity, it looks masculine or feminine. And if they identify as masculine, that part of their brain is typically masculine. And the same for those who identify as female. Not that's what they were assigned as, but what they identify as. And I do think that if we could get more people to go, oh, wait, what? Then that again is another fact you can't deny about the specific population. And again, like whether or not they choose to use that label is up to them. And they may use it, like I said, for a while. And then once they transition, they may be like, nope, I'm going to drop it. Now I'm just however they identify. And again, that doesn't necessarily have to be, I think that's the reason why we say gender fluid a lot of times is because our gender can change. How we identify can change. It does change with people. So I went back and I did a little bit of research, just kind of looking up some of your past or knowing some of the past instances in history of transgender. So in ancient cultures, accounts of transgender people, including non-binary and third gender people, have been identified going back to ancient times and cultures worldwide. For instance, the ancient Greek, Phrygian, and Roman eunuch priests of the Galley order had been interpreted by some scholars as transgender or third gender. In South Asia, Kira people have been recognized as a third gender since about 400 BC. In medieval Europe, documents have been studied as possible accounts of transgender people. Ben Kalonymus's lament for being born a man instead of a woman has been seen as an early account of gender dysphoria. John/Eleanor Reckner, a male-bodied Briton arrested in 1394 while living and doing sex work dressed as a woman, has been interpreted by some contemporary scholars as actually being transgender. Indigenous cultures. In some indigenous cultures, they are called two-spirited. North American indigenous fluid and third gender roles, including the Navajo, Nadlihi, apologies if I mispronounce these, and the Zuni Hamani have existed since pre-colonial times. My daughter did one of her, I think it was a art history project, and 2 years ago, and she was doing it on a Canadian artist that was indigenous, and not only that, but two-spirited. And the two-spirited oftentimes was revered. They actually were looked at as, I wouldn't necessarily say royalty, but almost like they're shamans, they're priests. Like they were supposed to embody more than just one spirit. And again, you were this masculine and feminine energy in one. And so again, these go back way before the politics in the last 4 years. Modern pioneers, what?
Like subdue that then, because if they were revered and seen as special, maybe the point was to kind of sweep, knock that out from under them. You're not special, you belong in one box. If you're not in one box, you're weird, you're bad.
I think it was just the fact that two-spirited was specific to to the indigenous, and we know what we did to the indigenous. So, modern pioneers. The interwar idea of sex change implied that sex or gender fluidity was possible and that individuals might choose their sex. It was not until the 1950s that transitioning became medically possible and eventually available in Britain. The pioneering trans people were Michael Dillon and Roberta Cowell. Michael Dillon was the first person in the world to transition from female to male through hormones and surgery. Dillon was sought out by Britain's first male to female trans woman, Roberta Cowell, in 1949. So again, these are cases of we've had them. Actually, Ethel, let me see what she's got here. She actually has a lot. Knowledge is power. I think the world evolves perfectly, and to change the sex may actually be a way for humanity to save the earth. We have too many people. Um, and then she said, a pope born as a woman in Rome, her sex was revealed when she gave birth to a baby. Promiscuity within the Catholic Church is not new. Nope, it's not. That no. We all possess female and male energies. We all have left and right brain. Half of our body is different from the other half. When I read faces, I give two readings. One is professional and the other is personal. That's interesting. I like that, Ethel. But yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that this is not new. I mean, we have, I believe now they've talked about that there were like there are Roman ancient statues that they thought they were one or the other, and now they're saying no, that they actually think they may be trans, that they were actually females who were going to war as soldiers and so forth. And again, it was kind of this thing like we saw some of this before. You look at Joan of Arc; she faked what she looked like. I mean, we've done that throughout history, and maybe that wasn't necessarily because they were trans, but it was to fit into a role and to identify the way that society would accept them. So they had to. And now, after we said you got to conform to this or conform to that, and when they want to switch so that they do conform, we've got all these politicians saying now we can't do that. So I thought they were just trying to clarify it for you. Like, I mean, that was my interpretation of it.
I know the first time I saw Mulan, I was like, is everything going to be a trans allegory for me from now on? Like, I'm just.
Yes. And I loved Mulan that was fantastic, right? Like, I mean, and it's not.
I'm probably reading it too much, but it's where I was.
what is that movie? Victor Victoria.
Oh my God, such a good one.
Right. That was an awesome one. And I can even remember, like, I think my mother kind of like when we first were talking about this, and I was like, Julie Andrews did this back in such and such. And my mom was like, wait, what? And I'm like, okay. The woman who taught me the musicals and who we watched musicals with all the time, you don't know what Victor Victoria is? Go check it out, Mom. And she came back and was just like, oh, and I'm like, yep. I mean, Shakespeare, guys, Shakespeare. How many women were in his plays? Well, on stage, they were all men.
We never minded it.
The kissing scenes,
we weren't upset
right?
about
The kissing scenes, the sex scenes, any of it that happened, they were all portrayed by men, and we didn't have this problem with it. And now we were fine.
We were fine with it as long as it was a way to, replace women, which was such in the time of Shakespeare, and keeping them off the stage. And we're fine with it as long as it's a joke, as long as it's some kind of entertainment or something we can poke fun of. But we're not okay with it if it's just how it is, if that's just how people want to live. It's completely silly.
It's ridiculous, honestly. We live in I was reading stuff today. Well, I'm reading every day. Like, there's just new legislation. Cooper was like sending me this report last night, and it was like 86 things that have, 86 legislations that have already come across. And I wrote them, and I was like, actually, 2 days ago I had read it was 100, and then I had read last night it was up to 126, and I didn't even look at the number today. If they'd come up with something else, and I'm sure somebody will. It's like a competition this year in the red states. It's going to be a competition. It's a way to push their voters to the polls. It's a way to create fear and to tell you that something huge is going on, to scare you, to think that something's going to change your children, that your children are going to catch something or want to do a trend. And that's not what's going on. Jenny, now I can tell you it was a gradual development with our children. It was not this, they came home one day, or they went to school one day as a female cheerleader and came home the next day and said, I want to be a football player. it didn't happen like that. It didn't. There was a lot of questioning. There was a lot of, I would say, if I'm not going to speak for Jenny, but in my situation, I think there was just a lot of, let's say flexibility, but definitely this kind of experimentation with trying to be more androgynous, more things to take the attention away. My son was definitely never feminine, so it was definitely either a masculine or androgynous. He kind of went back and forth between that, and then even changed up like what that masculine looked like, whether it was a masculine kind of laid back with the jeans and the plaid and the t-shirt, or was it the dress pants and the Dexter shoes and the bow ties? Like what was it? And what he did with his hair, and was he going to be more grungy, or was he going to do like the little Elvis coil, like like the whole 9 yards? It was kind of a flexing of who am I? And I think it's important for us to let our kids do that. Like, when they're at home, they have that flexibility that they're safe with us. I would rather my kid try and have that flexibility now than get out and then suddenly try and do it when he doesn't have a support system to come back to.
Yes. And I think there are also, you got to keep in mind, there are plenty of people who are shocked and in disbelief by a family member who always seem to present as the sex they were assigned at birth, and then they come out as trans, and it's a big change, and it wasn't an androgynous and slow process. Let me tell you what, that person has probably been faking, masking, and doing their very best to present the way that they know people want them to, because of their fear or their and so it doesn't matter how it comes about. If it's usually, I think, especially with the generation that we're raising right now, we're seeing it a little more slow process because we're accepting and we're but it's doesn't make it any less valid if somebody just like one day pops up and seems different or is saying things that don't make sense because they've always presented as very masculine or very feminine, because you don't know if that person has been desperately trying to conform for all that time and finally feels like they can be honest about who they are.
Right. And a lot of times it's a fear. If they've been masking, a lot of times it's fear of rejection. Let's be honest. We want to be accepted by our parents. We want to be loved by our family members. And if they're around family members or parents who they don't necessarily feel like are going to love them and accept them, they've heard their political ideologies, they've heard their religious beliefs. You're really talking about kids who are shoving a lot of things within and masking and covering up and doing the best they can. And I think, Jenny, you're right. I think it is partially we're at a point where, you and I were in this generation where we are trying to be more open and understanding to our kids. There's still quite a bit of pushback, but I think there is this, understanding that maybe we can be more accepting just to people in general, be kinder in general, be more understanding and inclusive and accepting, no matter what it is. Like whether it's your kid who's, the princess who wants to be the welder, or your son who wants to be a pastry chef, like whatever it is. I think if as parents, we just said, you know what? We weren't given the ability to kind of experiment and look at all these different avenues of who we want to be and how we want to express ourselves. And I think that is why you do see it slightly seen more. I also think that the last 20 years, there's been such an acceptance in society with gay rights and the representation in movies and in music and in books, that I do feel like that the younger generations go, okay, well, if all this is out here, it must be okay for me to come out. And I do think that is why you see more people come out now than you did 20 years ago. It's because 20 years ago, we weren't talking about it on TV and in books and in music. It was very obscure, if so. And now it's become mainstream, which means it's more accepted. It may not be accepted in your home, but it is being more accepted in society. And so these kids feel like, okay, it's safe for me to come out. It's safe for me to say, okay, what you say I am, that's not who I am. This is not how how I identify by you telling me that I feel this way, it's actually hurting me.
Right.
That's the big part. We're hurting kids when we don't believe them. We're hurting them. And I don't get the pushback from parents who who want to say and do others. Ethel's got some big comments here. Something or someone or something greater than us is the designer, not those who judge others here on earth. Yeah, yes, definitely. And then myself and a colleague in Canada are sponsoring a young adult gay man in Africa. His life is at risk at the moment. He's living in a camp. We hope to see the color of his eyes and hug him within the next few months. His father used to abuse him and then eventually threw him out of the house. And I have a feeling, Ethel, you're talking about some of the, it's probably I'm not exactly sure how you say it. I think it's the Kakuma camp there. And then spoken with several of them. In fact, I tried for 6 months trying to get some answers with the UN because that specific group is supposed to have answers within, typically you're supposed to be moved through that camp within 2 years. And some of those people have been there for 5 years. And it's because they don't want to finish giving them the designation as being a refugee, because that means they get to move from that camp onto a second or first world country to opportunity. And there's a lot of discrimination in certain regions of Africa, specifically in that Kakuma camp. They are very, very, very at risk. They are in danger all the time. They have to protect themselves. They have certain people that stay up at all. Like they have guards. They take watches to watch each other's houses so they're not burned down, so they're not attacked, they're not beaten, they're not raped. It's a horrific situation. And I called for about 6 months and finally got a female one day on the line who said, are you trying to get through and get answers for the Kakuma camp? And I was like, yes, ma'am. And she said, you're not going to get them. You're American and you're female. You're not going to get them ever.
Wow.
And I went back to the couple of people that I've been speaking to in those camps that I've been trying to get answers for and just told them that I really did kind of believe that, because I had been on the hunt for answers for 6 months and no one would return or answer my phone calls ever. So yeah, I didn't like walk away from that, but I did kind of go, okay, I don't think I'm going to get answers this way, not myself. And I had trans rights to fight for here. I mean, and I was doing my best to help them, but I'm pretty sure that's the camp that she's speaking of. And yeah, it's a sad situation that is, but that is currently the rhetoric that is being used in a lot of countries against this specific community, which is one reason why we decided to do this show, to say, look, there's nothing wrong with these kids. There's nothing wrong with these people. They're like me and you. They have blood, they breathe, they go to work, they want to have a home, they want to live and breathe and be able to move about the country or around any country without having to worry about being discriminated just because of how they identify. We used to say that happened to people because of the color of their skin, and we say that doesn't happen anymore, even though we know that's not true either.
Like what?
And this is just another example of how we're seeing the discrimination piled up against one particular group. So yeah, we're gonna be shouty until until something gets done. And this year, yeah, it was just important to really kind of get this out here and keep talking about it, because we want you to see that our kids are normal. Whatever the heck normal is supposed to be, because normal is subjective.
And they're wonderful and they're human beings and they have the potential and the ability to do great things, but they can't do them if they're not alive, and they can't do them if they are just steeped in the kind of depression and the anxiety that is caused by.
Oh no.
I'm sorry. I'm
There
kind
you go.
of in a weird spot.
No, you're
I'm
all
not sure
right.
if
I
you can
think
still hear me.
you cut out briefly there, and I think it was caused by, and I think you were saying caused by the
Uh-oh,
legislation
I
that
can't hear
is
her.
that is going on. And I think it's probably the signal is all right.
I'm gonna
So
have to let you
let's see,
close up,
process.
Amber. I'm suddenly not working.
Right, that's all right. I got you. I got you. We are at time anyway. It's 8 o'clock, guys, and we will see you next week. We will be back at 7 o'clock normal time. And with that, let me pull up our video and I will say good night. Bye, guys.